Hi, and welcome to the third of four presentations dealing with the Allied successes during World War II. These are notes 13.5c, and this is, of course, Mr. Marks. While the United States was making many advancements in the Pacific, and the Allies were making many advances into Europe, the Germans had one last large assault, one last try to break through the Allied lines, and this would be known as the Battle of the Bulge. It's called the Bulge because if you can see the map there on the bottom right, the German troops were attempting to create this break in the line that the Allies had created to cut off Allied troops from anybody else around them, take key towns, and then cut the Allies off from their supplies on the beaches. This battle will run from December 16th of 1944 through January 25th of 1945, and it really is Germany's last major offensive against the Allies. They wanted to cut the American and British forces in half, and then from that point be able to encircle and then destroy the four remaining Allied armies. And with this, they weren't looking to dominate Europe the way that they had in the past. The goal of this campaign was quite simply to have control of enough land to be able to successfully negotiate a peace treaty that could benefit Germany rather than just being wiped out entirely. The objectives of this battle on the German side were not realized. The American forces, many of them under the command of a General Patton, will be able to regroup and surround the Germans that had tried to surround them. The Battle of the Bulge will end up being the single largest and bloodiest battle that American forces fought in World War II, with over 19,000 Americans killed. Now, I want to point out that was the bloodiest American battle, but if you remember, the Germans had already faced casualties on the Eastern Front of up to 300,000 men. So, while this is the bloodiest one for the Americans, it wasn't even close for the Germans. With the Battle of the Bulge, it was basically a rush to see who could get to Berlin the quickest. The problem was the United States knew that if the Soviet Union had control of any land, it was not going to give it up. So the concern was that the Soviets would manage to get control of Germany before Allied troops could get there. It was literally a race between these two groups to end the war in Europe as fast as possible, with as much territory under the U.S. side as they could. You can see here, and it's a little bit difficult, but you have the Allied pushes from the Soviet Union. You can see their lines heading into Germany from the east, and then the Allied pushes starting in France that are pushing the U.S. forces up through Italy and again over through France. You see there was another landing zone from Italy going into southern France as well. This is a real race, and the German city of Berlin, the capital city of Berlin, will be taken by the Soviets first. But the German troops in Berlin will retreat towards the U.S. line, having heard of the awful things that the Soviets were doing in retaliation for the awful things that the Germans had done to Soviet soldiers in their concentration camps. The Germans would race to the west in order to surrender themselves to the Allied forces of the U.S. or the British, so that way they would not fall under Soviet control. One way or the other, on May 8th of 1945, the Allied powers formally accepted the unconditional surrender of all Nazi Germany forces. This was the end of Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. Now, this was May May 8th. On April 30th, so just a little bit over a week before, Hitler had committed suicide. He had married his sweetheart, Eva Braun, just as the Allies were advancing in, and the two of them committed suicide. And Hitler made certain that his followers knew to destroy his remains. You see, Mussolini had been recaptured and then hung and dragged through the streets, his body mutilated. And Hitler had heard tales of this and did not want the same thing to happen to him. He also wanted to have his body destroyed in a way that would make other people think that there was a chance he was still alive and continue on his quest. He did, however, draw up a will that put the power into hands of some of his other advisors, and it's these advisors who end up surrendering on May 8th. That day becomes known as VE Day, which stands for Victory in Europe. And that's the end of World War II on the European side, but World War II is not yet over.